Thara's first memory of the Raken holding cell was the sting of violet light against her eyelids, as though dawn itself had been infused with electric pain. She awoke on a platform of cool metallic plating, her arms and legs encased in sleek, bioluminescent cuffs that writhed with energy. Each pulse sent fresh jolts of agony through her muscles, forcing her back onto the ground whenever she tried to stand. Above her, the ceiling panels shimmered with shifting hexagonal patterns, part illumination, part surveillance grid, tracking every breath she drew. Panicked, Thara blinked rapidly, trying to orient herself. The air tasted of burnt circuitry and something more organic, an undercurrent of decay that made her stomach lurch. Through the translucent wall of her cell she saw them, a cluster of Rican scientists, their insectoid frames glistening under the violet glare. Serrated mandibles clicked rhythmically as they communicated in harsh, staccato clicks and whistles that reverberated through the chamber. Useless, they intoned in unison, voices fused by a collective hive resonance. The words slashed through Thara's mind like a serrated knife. Useless, they repeated, the sound echoing into every crevice of her consciousness. She shuddered. On Earth she had been a linguistics student, fascinated by patterns of sound and meaning. Here her tongue felt foreign, stiff, incapable of forming words. Her last memory before capture was stepping aboard the research vessel Artemis, convinced that the Vreka had offered her a chance to study xenolinguistics. Instead, she'd become their unwilling subject. Tentatively, she flexed her wrists. The cuffs tightened as if alive, reacting to the faintest flicker of rebellion. Thara closed her eyes and focused inward, seeking solace in the only refuge she still owned, her mind. She reached for the neuro-silken threads of her Aelrian heritage, the flickering visions that had first begun during her childhood, phantom memories of coral crystal cities floating in star-kissed voids. But the Vreka dismissed those visions as random neural misfires, useless data, in a species too primitive to grasp interstellar mysteries. Still, Thara clung to them. Deep in her mind's eye, she conjured the image of an amber cathedral, suspended on a band of orbiting rings, a fleeting glimpse of grandeur she refused to lose. She drew breath, feeling the ache of her ribs under the weight of her torment. Every inhalation felt like inhaling shards of glass. A sudden crackle interrupted her thoughts. One of the Reckon scientists, taller than the rest, its exoskeleton, mottled with oil-black plates, had approached the cell's conduit panel. With a gloved claw, it manipulated a series of capacitive switches. The energy cuffs around Thara's ankles flared violently, sending a surge of electricity through her legs. She cried out, arching her back, teeth bared, as her muscles spasmed, uncontrollably. The Rekka scientists leaned closer, their compound eyes glinting with sadistic curiosity. They recorded her screams in waveforms, noted the dilation of her pupils, tracked the tachycardia in her heart rhythms. To them, she was nothing more than an experiment in endurance. Useless, they murmured, and with mechanical precision, they lowered the current, just enough to keep her conscious, just enough to remind her of her helplessness. Thara's vision swam. The violet light bled into dark smudges at the edges of her sight. Her thoughts scrambled. Why was she here? What could they want with her? In the moments before darkness claimed her, she clung to one truth. She refused to be broken. Time lost meaning. Days, or was it weeks, slipped past in a blur of containment and cruelty. The Vreka cycled through torture protocols, thermal blasts that seared her skin, sonic waves that rattled her bones, and the ever-present drip of neural probes inserted through the energy cuffs that scraped her synapses raw. Each trial left new scars, some etched into her flesh, others carved into her psyche. Yet in that relentless agony, Thara discovered something unexpected. When the probes activated, tuning into her psychic resonance, she could sense the faint hum of the Vrekan hive network. Like a distant storm, it thrummed in her mind's periphery. She learned to tune her awareness, to dive beneath the surface of her fear and ride the currents of alien thought. In those depths, she glimpsed shards of forbidden knowledge, Construction schematics for the Vreka's quantum combustion drives, statistical models predicting colony expansions, the unsettling apathy with which they catalogued sentient races as mere resource nodes. Every vision was razor-sharp, a blade carving new understanding amidst her pain. When Thara later lay panting, on the platform her body shredded, the Vreka would crow about her usefulness as a specimen, even if they still labeled her a worthless human. Their arrogance was their weakness. It was one she intended to exploit. Between the trials, she began whispering words in the ancient Aelrian tongue, phrases of protection her ancestors had once intoned beneath emerald suns. The Vreka, dismissive as ever, mocked her to her face, their clicks and whistles vibrating the air around her. But Thara persisted, chanting low enough to be almost inaudible. Ilaria Navara, guide my soul. The syllables felt like cool water on her scorched nerves, a lifeline in the endless void of oppression. Occasionally, when her captors convened outside the cell's window, she caught snatches of their conversation, a drone about project. Heliox references to a hidden archive of star charts, nods to a more secretive experiment they dubbed the Convergence. Each fragment teased a greater purpose behind her imprisonment, one that brushed at the edges of her visions. Despite the terror that gnawed at her every thought, Thara refused to yield to despair. She sharpened her mind behind her steely resolve, vowing that if the Vreka saw her as useless, she would prove them spectacularly wrong. And so she waited, shackled and unheard, her spirit coiling for the moment when she could transform her torment into the spark of her own liberation. Thara awoke to the metallic tang of fear. Her cell, once a simple chamber of restraint, had transformed overnight into an arena of cruelty. The Rican scientists, their chitinous limbs clicking in eager anticipation, herded her into the heart of the facility, the trial hall. Massive viewing galleries rose on all sides, their glass walls refracting the violet glare of containment fields into fractal patterns of humiliation. At the center stood a cylindrical tank, 6 meters tall, filled with neon green viscera, a nutrient-rich suspension designed to paralyze, flesh without extinguishing consciousness. Human subjects drowned in that serum, and though Thara had endured worse, the sight of it made her pulse thunder in her ears. The lead scientist, a gaunt, scarred veteran whose mandibles bore the birthmarks of centuries, loomed over her. His many-jointed fingers traced the gleaming rim of the tank as he spoke in measured clicks. Subject H042, he intoned, voice amplified through the hall's resonance grid. You will enter the constriction matrix. Your neural feedback will be recorded and archived. Proceed. Thara forced her legs forward. Each step felt like wading through mortar. She climbed the platform and slid into the tank's open hatch. The moment her skin touched the serum, tendrils of bioliquid curled around her limbs, pinning her in place. She tried to scream but found only a strangled gasp as the searing cold of the fluid stole her breath. The hatch sealed. A transparent dome lowered over her head. The lights dimmed, leaving her body to float in the eerie glow. Below the surface, electrodes unfurled like mechanical jellyfish, pressing against her temples. She fought the instinct to struggle. Resistance only invited more invasive probes. Inside her skull, a storm began to rage. The electrodes transduced her pain, fear, and memory into streams of data. They reached for the psychic ember she carried, the latent Aelrian echo flickering at the edge of her mind, and began to scrape at it. Thara clenched every muscle, willing her consciousness to withdraw, to curl into a knot of defiance they could not untangle. Above her, the Vreka watched with cold fascination. Monitors traced the fluctuations of her neural waves, spikes of terror, troughs of despair, occasional bursts of psychic interference that glowed like radioactive embers. They muttered observations into their collective network, data points, to be compared against every other sapient species they had catalogued, and yet in the marrow of her mind, Thara found a hidden refuge. When the probes grew too invasive, she retreated into the amber cathedral of her Aelrian visions, praying the ancient words her grandmother had taught her at bedtime on Earth. Ilaria Navara, guardians of the hidden path, shield me, now in this veil of despair. The syllables echoed like a lullaby amid the storm of electrodes. For a heartbeat, the probes wavered. She felt a tingle of disruption. The Reka adjusted their instruments, hunting for that disturbance. Thara held her breath as the neural tendrils scraped her synapses raw. Suddenly, a jolt of pure white energy surged through her veins. The chamber's circuits overloaded, and for an instant all lights went out. In the memory of darkness, Thara glimpsed the impossible. Star-choked skies, phosphorescent seas, spires of coral crystal rising into alien dawns. The vision was so vivid she nearly believed herself transported. A thunderous crash of feedback jolted her back. The dome above cracked and the serum drained with a hiss. Thara fell onto the platform, coughing as her lungs refilled with recycled air. She forced herself upright, trembling with adrenaline, even as the Vreka scientists writhed in fury at their readings. They clustered around the shattered dome, peering at their consoles, their mandibles screeching in accusation. Subject H042 is unstable, the lead scientist snarled. His compound eyes bore into the tank's broken shards. Recalibrate. Increase damping field. Begin trial 23B. Thara had no time to rest. They dragged her down a corridor lined with prison cells where other captives, humans, Ielrians, even a few formerly free sapients caught in the Reka's web, lay broken or dead. The stench of chemical burns and neural ash hung heavy in the air. Her next ordeal was the resonance gauntlet, a narrow hallway bristling with emitters that pulsed in chaotic frequencies, designed to shatter mental defenses. The Reka herded her, in her wrists and ankles bound by re-energized cuffs. As she stepped forward, the emitters flared, sending dissonant waves through her mind. Pain blossomed behind her eyes, and she lurched forward, clawing at the walls. Every cell in her body screamed. Memories of Earth, her mother's lullabies, the taste of rain on asphalt, the laugh of her best friend, flickered through her agony like brief, painful comets. They stabbed at her, reminding her why she could not surrender. When the pulses subsided, Thara collapsed at the gauntlet's end. Her legs buckled beneath her body weight, and she lay panting, saliva mingling with tears. The Reka technicians recorded every flicker of emotion, relief, shame, sorrow. To them, she was an open circuit. To her, it was purity. Between trials, they offered her no respite. Food rations arrived in nutrient packs infused with tranquilizers. Her nights became dreams of endless hallways and the echo of alien laughter. If sleep came, it brought nightmares, tendrils dragging her into the motherboard heart of the facility, her screams swallowed by humming servers. And yet, amid the crushing despair, Thara sensed a change. The fractures in her psyche began to coalesce into something else, an awareness of the Rekan hive mind throbbing at the facility's core. When they jacked her neural probes into her spine, she could feel the pulse of their communal consciousness, a cold calculating rhythm that cataloged every sensation. She listened, she learned. The hive mind trusted its shields too much. It never suspected that a single human could breach its periphery. But Thara did. She cultivated her visions, threading them through her suffering, until she could surf the eddies of the Rekan network for brief moments, snatching fragments of tactical logs, energy signatures, personnel rotas. Every scrap of data was ammunition. Every moment of agony honed her resolve. One day, they would need that knowledge, and so she endured, forging her agony into a blade of purpose. While the Reka labeled her useless, she was quietly turning their greatest weapon, her mind, into the very instrument of her deliverance. The day she would shatter their hive from within was coming, and in the silence between trials she whispered once more, "Ilaria Navara, grant me the strength to stand." The words were soft, but in the emptiness of the trial hall, they rang like a promise of reckoning yet to come. A tremor ran through the facility as the docking clamps released. The Rekan command deck reverberated with klaxons and the shouts of insectoid officers. Thara's superheated cell rattled against the tremors. She had almost forgotten the world, beyond the trial hall's cold circuitry, and now it was colliding with her in an avalanche of sound and light. The heavy blast doors groaned open. Armed Freakin guards swarmed the corridors, scanning for intruders. Thara peered through her bars as soldiers in sleek carapace armor scoured every alcove. Above them, hollow projections flashed orders in the sharp angles of Raken's script. She crouched, low, wrists still bound by ionic cuffs. Her only defense a flicker of hope that someone, anyone, might be here to save her. A firm hand clamped onto her shoulder. She whirled, heart leaping, and stared into a human face framed by a reinforced exosuit helmet. Beneath the visor's sheen, she saw determined green eyes and a faint dusting of freckles. The human's voice, distorted by the suit's comlink, had a calm, resolute edge. "Thara Venz," he said, sliding a bioscanner over her bands. "I'm Captain Jorik Dane of the Unified Earth Coalition. I've come for you." Her throat closed. Rescue felt like a mirage. "Why me?" she rasped, voice hoarse from weeks of mute suffering. He crouched beside her, toggling a handheld decryptor against the lock. Sparks danced across the cuffs, then they fell away. Thara flexed her wrists, tears springing to her eyes. "You're part Ielrian," he explained, his helmet retracting enough to reveal a stern jaw and the curve of his mouth as he offered her a gauntleted hand. "Your genetics hold the key to Project Heliox, but more than orders." He hesitated, sincerity softening his tone. "I claim you as my own. No one else will touch you again." Behind him, a squad of Reka soldiers burst into the antechamber, their acid-tipped lances raised. Jorik didn't falter. He drew a compact plasma pistol and executed a precise burst that severed the neural link cables trailing from a nearby console. A shockwave hurled the invaders back, their shrieks lost in the explosion of sparking wires. "Move!" he barked, grabbing Thara's arm. They raced down the corridor. Alarms blared overhead, an ear-splitting symphony of klaxons and disembodied announcements. Thara stumbled over debris, discarded probes, charred paneling, slick streams of coolant. Behind them, Raken engineers attempted to seal the bulkheads. Jorik hurled himself against a sliding door console. Sparks erupted as he overrode the access protocols, and with a hiss, the door slid open. Light flooded in, a corridor lit by starship, docking lights rather than the facility's violet glow. Jorik ushered Thara through an airlock into a cavernous hangar. Half-shielded transports lay crippled. Venting fuel lines hissed like wounded serpents. At the far end, a sleek human starship hovered, its engines humming with coiled power. Jorik sprinted toward its rear ramp as Raken patrols spilled into the hangar. "Stay low," he hissed, vaulting onto a cargo pallet. Thara followed, muscles shaking. As they climbed, she realized how wasted thin weeks of captivity had made her. Her uniform hung in tatters. Her skin bore the bruise-colored impressions of restraints. They reached the ramp. Jorik punched in override codes. The ramp groaned downward, just as a volley of ion bolts slammed into the hangar bulkhead, showering the deck with molten spall. One bolt seared the outer edge of the ramp, sending electric sparks dancing under Thara's feet. "Hold on!" Jorik grabbed her shoulders and pulled her inside. The ramp retracted with a mechanical snarl. Alarms flared across the cockpit's hollow panel, warning of hull breaches below. Jorik strapped Thara into the co-pilot's harness. He keyed the comlink. "Engines to full thrust," he commanded the unseen pilot. "Evasive burn on my mark." Thara pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the viewport. The hangar walls receded, the stars beyond the docking bay opening like a wound in space. She felt the starship surge forward, tiresome inertia sloughing off her frail muscles. The roar of ascent pounded in her ears, mingling with her pounding heart. As they broke free from the planet's gravity well, Jorik exhaled, shoulders dropping for the first time since she'd laid eyes on him. He patted her hand, his touch firm and reassuring. "You're safe now," he said softly. "No Vraken terror will ever bind you again." Thara's breath hitched. The wound of her captivity, flesh bruised, spirit frayed, seemed to shrink under the warmth of his words. She looked up at him, the first smile in what felt like an eternity forming on her cracked lips. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling with relief and disbelief. He answered by lifting her hand to his helmetless cheek. "You're mine," he repeated, echoing his claim. And I intend to keep you that way. Beyond the viewport, the purple haze of the Recon world faded into the starry void. Thara closed her eyes and let the hum of the engines lull her. For the first time since her capture, she permitted herself to believe in something more than survival. In the rhythmic pulse of human innovation around her, and in the unwavering conviction of a single man who had staked everything to call her his own, she felt the first buds of hope. And as the stars stretched into streaks of light, Thara Venz, once deemed useless, held tight to Jorik's promise, ready to reclaim her identity and chart a new destiny among the boundless heavens. The starship Aurora's Edge shuddered as its emergency thrusters roared to life, spitting trails of cobalt exhaust into the void. Thara Venz pressed her palms flat against the co-pilot's console, feeling the ship's power weave beneath her fingertips, raw, unbridled, and finally hers. All around them, distant wreckage and brittle orbital debris glowed like dying embers against the black tapestry of space. Jorik Dane slid into the pilot's seat, his exosuit still humming with residual charge. He cut a deft figure of calm in, the cockpit's pulsating light. "Hold on," he murmured, yanking the throttles forward. The Aurora's Edge vaulted away from the hangar mouth, slipping through the planet's ion defenses in a blur of plasma and shattered sensor arrays. Thara exhaled, the tension that had clenched her ribs since capture finally loosening. She'd braced for a life of captivity, of endless tests and fractured dreams. But now, hurtling through hyperspace, she tasted something more intoxicating than fear or pain. Freedom. "Trajectory to Coalition space," Jorik announced, his voice steady even as alarms flickered across the display. "We'll need to run silent through the Helix Nebula." He engaged the ship's stealth matrix, and the hum of scanners dimmed to a quiet whisper. "I've cleared a path through the known patrol routes, but we'll have to stay sharp." Thara nodded, her fingers drifting to the holoprojection between them. It bloomed into a star chart etched with ancient Elrian glyphs, coordinates she alone could read. "This is the archive," she said, tracing the looping script with awe. "It's a hidden vault built by my ancestors. If we can reach it, we'll find the technology they left behind. The key to reverse engineering faster than light travel." Jorik's gaze met hers, unwavering. "Then that's where we're headed." He tapped a sequence into the nav console and the course adjusted. The ship gently yawed toward an uncharted sector beyond Coalition borders. Already the cold fear of exile melted away under the promise of purpose. Days became a tapestry of starfire and whispered confessions. Thara reclaimed her strength in the ship's low-gravity gym, every strained push-up a vow that she would never be powerless again. Jorik watched her with a mixture of admiration and something warmer. Pride, perhaps, or something resembling hope. In the mess hall they traded stories. He of hardened missions and lost crewmates. She of Earth's dew-drenched mornings and the vanished Elrian world she'd only glimpsed in visions. Yet for all the warmth between them, shadows lingered. Thara's dreams were haunted by tendrils of violet light, memories of recon probes and fractured neural echoes. Each time she awoke, Jorik was there, brushing damp hair from her forehead and whispering, "You're safe now." And she would believe him, until sleep reclaimed her and nightmares whispered of unfinished trials. On the 5th day, they crossed the edge of the Helix Nebula. Swirling clouds of cerulean gas and crystalline motes brushed the ship's shields, like fingertips of mist. Jorik cut the engines to a ghostly hum and guided the Aurora's Edge into the nebula's heart. Inside, starshine bent and refracted, painting corridors of violet blue that felt both alive and watchful. Thara followed him to the astrogation deck, where the commodity of silence lay heavy between them. She drew in a steady breath and placed her hand on Jorik's arm. "Are you ready for what we'll find?" she asked, voice soft. "I'm ready for whatever comes," he replied, tracing the constellations with a fingertip. "Because we face it together." Her heart clenched with something fierce and bright. She had been called useless, broken, expendable. Yet here, in the shifting nebula, She stood as equals with the man who had claimed her life as his own. Beyond, the nebula's veil lay the hidden archive, a skeletal lattice of alien architecture, floating in stasis against the black. Coral crystal spires jutted from a central nexus, each etched with the same glyphs Thara had memorized. The Aurora's edge docked against a landing berth, and airlocks hissed open to reveal the archive's hollow halls. Thara stepped forward, her footsteps echoing on iridescent flooring. Jorik followed, weapon drawn, scanning each chamber. They passed vaults of cryotombs and data seals humming with silent energy. At last, they reached the Hall of Convergence, a circular chamber crowned by a sphere of translucent crystal suspended on magnetized fields. "This is it," Thara whispered. She approached the control dais, her fingers dancing over the glyphs. The sphere stirred, casting intricate patterns of light across the walls. A deep hum resonated through the archive's core, as though awakening from a millennia-long slumber. Energy coalesced at Thara's touch. She felt it surge through her veins, Aelrian heritage unfurling like stardust. The sphere's light expanded into rivulets of power, weaving technical schematics into the air. Designs for quantum-fold drives, neural interface matrices, and star maps to worlds uncharted by human or alien alike. Jorik watched, awe mirrored in his eyes. "You've unlocked it," he breathed. Thara turned to him, her eyes shining with flecks of crystal light. "We have unlocked it," she corrected, reaching out to take his hand. Together, they would chart a new course, one unbound by the HFY, cruelty of the Rekka, unshackled from the limits of any single race. As they prepared to transmit the blueprints to the Coalition and begin the Aelrian Renaissance, Thara felt the full weight of her journey, from agony to authority, from despair to destiny. The stars beyond the archive's crystal walls seemed to pulse in approval, each a promise of worlds reborn. And as the first rays of a new dawn ignited in the heart of the Aelrian archive, Thara Vens, once deemed useless, stood triumphant, at the threshold of humanity's greatest adventure. Under the watchful glow of coral crystal spires, she and Jorik Dane shaped the future of two civilizations, bound by love, courage, and the unbreakable promise of freedom's dawn.